Book 104 and the final book of 2019 was the first 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North. So this book was set by a book club, and I'd gone to a different book club because my original book club was suggesting books that I wasn't enjoying. So I thought, I'm going to try a different book club and see if it's me or if it's the books that are being suggested. And guess what? I really enjoyed this book. So it's not me. This was really, really interesting. It kind of starts with Harry August, and he's at the end of his 11th life. He's about to die. And a little girl comes and speaks to him and says that the world's about to end, which is basically on the first page, so I'm not really spoiling anything for you. So there's kind of intrigue in the plot straight away. So why is the world going to end? Why is Harry August on his 11th life? Why has he got 15 lives? Like, what's happening? Who's this little girl? And so it was just really interesting to start off with, and I wanted to find out about Harry August and about the story. I really enjoyed reading it overall. It reminded me a lot of Replay by Grimwood, which is all about the central character reliving his life on replay again and again. And it kind of addresses that character of what would you do differently if you could live your life again? What would you change? Claire North is really skillful at manipulating structure. So she is talking about Harry August's lives, and it's not in chronological order, so it flips back and forth between lives in a more kind of thematic way. And it reminded me very much of, I don't know if you've watched Premonition with Sandra Bullock in it. It's very much like that, where she has to kind of write it down to figure out like what happened on the different days. Well, it's very much like that. I was kind of thinking, should I write down like what's happening in each of his lives, because I'm getting really confused because it's flipping back and forth. But this confusion was really, really good because it kept you wanting to read it to figure out and kind of solve what was going on. And so I really like that. If you don't like books that flip around and you find that really confusing and you don't like it, I wouldn't suggest reading this book, because this book does it a lot. But for me, that's something that I really enjoy about books when it does that, because I need to be intellectually stimulated. And so for me, I like to work things out for myself. And so it's a really good technique to use in books for people like me. And if you're the same, you'll like it as well. So the plot jumps around a lot, but I loved that. I also like the fact that in different lives, the paths would diverge and you would meet the same characters again, but in a different context because it was a different life. So I thought that was a really nice touch, really, really interesting that she did that. And she kind of complicated the plot just enough to keep it interesting. So the integration of like other characters, and she kind of integrates in historical events that have happened and how this character played a part in those historical events in different lives and what impact they had. And she had the integration of kind of a good versus evil kind of organisation, and all of how that worked. It wasn't just kind of an individual look at Harry August and his lives being relived. It was more of a societal structure and the impact of that on the world and how the world was going to end and things. So it was interesting for that reason. I was very disappointed about how it ended. I felt like it got quite repetitive at the end, and it did integrate like historical events like Chernobyl and radiation poisoning. And I've watched the the HBO series of Chernobyl, and I've watched what happens to you when you get radiation poisoning, and it's horrific. And so as I was reading it, I was imagining that, and I think because of that context that I had, it made the book seem more emotional and realistic for me. So I thought it was quite good, but I feel like if you didn't have that, you might not like it as much, it might not impact you as much. And it was kind of, it flopped at the end in terms of how it finished. I'm not kind of going to spoil it and go into it, but it could have been a lot stronger. I felt like it had gone through, like it's a big book, it had gone through a lot of the story, and a lot of it, like, you know, this much of it is probably just really repetitive because there's two characters trying to get one up on each other. And so it keeps like repeating a lot, and the actual outcome of it might not be an outcome. It might be that it didn't play out the way that it was like projected to, which is a little bit like, you know, the end of Inception when you're not quite sure. It was a little bit like that. It actually got slated in the book club because the book club was suggesting that it's very inaccurate in terms of how Claire North describes the science in it, because there's a lot of science talked about in it, and she talks about like a quantum mirror, and they were literally slating her for that. So I think whilst it's not completely accurate in what she's saying, I still think it's a good book. And it's 404 pages, which is massive, and it sustained my attention throughout. I wanted to carry on reading it. I was invested in the characters. I was enjoying reading it. And normally after about 200 pages, I get bored. So I kind of thought that that is testament to how good it was and how much I enjoyed it, because I did want to read the rest of it. I'm noticing that I've got a little bit of a, I think, oh, I've underlined something. Let's read this to you, what my underlining was. So I put, nothing has any consequence, and I'm tired of a life where nothing I do has any meaning for anything more than myself, and that over the years I've grown numb inside, hollow and empty, and I drift from situation to situation like a ghost, visiting an old graveside in search of an explanation. I thought that that was really interesting when I read it, because a lot of the book is philosophical, because it's addressing what's the meaning of life, because this person's reliving lives and understanding that he doesn't have much purpose, and it's all about him kind of trying to find meaning, which I thought was quite interesting, because I think a lot of people these days, because their kind of needs are met and they can take care of themselves and there's not that kind of struggle anymore, people have more of this life crisis of what's my meaning and what's my purpose, because they're not, you know, toiling at something. So it's quite philosophical in that way as well. So yeah, definitely recommend it. It's a good read. And I was interested in reading something else of Claire North, but until I went to the book club, because they slated it and they said that her other book was worse than this, so I probably won't read any more of hers, but I would definitely recommend this one. It was really good.